Welcome to Lighten Up TV, enlightening, inspiring, and empowering humanity. This is a journey of self-discovery. On this journey, we are in search of answers to the burning questions that have intrigued mankind for millennia. Who are we? Where did we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going? By merging scientific discoveries with spiritual revelations, we will explore the possibility that mind and matter are one and the same in a vibratory field of pure consciousness. What if this eternally expanding field of consciousness is of and from the same source? These revelations, that we may actually share one mind in a unified field that expands into the cosmos, has the potential to cause a powerful shift in the collective consciousness. On our fascinating journey, we will explore ancient legends, modern discoveries, and emerging truths about the spiraling creative forces that spun this creation into being. From spirituality to religion, superstring theory to the Big Bang, from gods and goddesses to angels and aliens, we will dive into the mysteries of creation. Are you ready to lighten up?
Starring your host, Suzanne Ross, television personality and producer, inspirational author and speaker. She is a 5D truth seeker and spiritual pioneer on the front lines, raising the frequency of humanity. Through her shows, books, and events, she has dedicated her life to activating the matrix for global ascension.
Welcome to a special edition of Lighten Up TV, featuring sneak peek clips from many of the interviews I've done over the last few years. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to a very intriguing episode of Supernatural Sedona, a virtual quest for the truth about our origin and destiny. On this episode, we are going to be exploring the ancient mysteries of the American Southwest. We'll examine the possibilities that the ancient people of Egypt, Tibet, and Sedona in the Grand Canyon are all interconnected. What if the ancient Egyptians, Tibetans, and Native Americans are all interrelated as ancient ancestors? To guide us on our journey, we are joined by well-known author, adventurer, and star of the very popular television series Ancient Aliens, David Childress. Welcome, David, and thank you so much for joining us.
No, it's good to be here.
As we explore the origin and destiny of our civilization here in Sedona, the origin myths of the Native Americans become very intriguing. And I think many people believe they were the first settlers of the American Southwest. But now we may have proof that they are descendants of a much earlier race, maybe even predating our first known civilizations. Who do you think the first settlers of the American Southwest were?
Well, mainstream archaeologists and anthropologists are telling us that all Native Americans walked across the Bering Straits, came from Siberia to Alaska, and then walked down through Canada and ultimately down to Mexico and walked all the way to South America, too.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea that ancient people had to walk every place rather than, say, going by boat is a big schism, really, within archaeology and anthropology. And it's what's really known as the schism between isolationists versus diffusionists. So in the isolationist version, oceans are barriers people can't just get into a boat and go someplace. Well, you know, oceans are barriers. So if you wanted to go from, say, China or Egypt to South America or Mexico or something, well, you have to walk there everywhere through thousands of miles of hostile tribes and everything like that. You just can't get into a boat because oceans are barriers. Now, the flip side of that is that oceans aren't barriers. Oceans are highways. And in fact, the easy way to go to someplace, really, in a distance, is to go by boat. And if you want to look at the highways of a continent, look at the river systems. And in fact, major cities are often built where rivers meet an ocean or come to a lake or something like that.
For trade. And,
Right. So the idea that people couldn't get into boats in China or Southeast Asia or Egypt or Spain or North Africa and India even, and go somewhere in a boat, I mean, that's actually unscientific. But yet that's what's being taught to us today in universities around our country. And these PhD professors are telling us, yeah, people can't get into a boat and go somewhere. They have to walk. It's crazy. So, in fact, when you look at, say, the stories of the Hopis and apparently the Zunis, Indians too, their story is that they came here by boat on a very long trip.
LightenUpTV.net proudly presents best-selling author, world-renowned speaker, and a clear channel for source, the practical mystic Maureen St. Germain. Hello and welcome to Lighten Up TV. I am your host, Suzanne Ross, and I'm so excited to be here today with the practical mystic, Maureen St. Germain. Welcome, Maureen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
I am so delighted that you could make time for our discussion today, Maureen. I have been a fan of yours for many years, and it started with this book right here, and it is dog-eared. I sat for many hours in my shrine room practicing this Merkaba meditations, and they were really powerful. I experienced shifting into higher dimensional experiences of reality in short order, and so truly remarkable. And I know that since then you have written 4 more books, and here recently your new book, Waking Up in 5D, was recognized as a bestseller by retailers nationwide. So congratulations.
Thank you. It's very exciting to have the retailers write in your name. I was a write-in candidate, and come out on top like that across the nation. It's very, very amazing. And what a nice surprise to not even know that this was happening until it reaches the print. So that was very cool, because what they did is they had a magazine issue devoted to bestsellers in the stores. And there were all kinds of categories, but I was #1 in books. You know, my advertising guy said, well, what category were you in? And I said, all books.
Wow.
And it was like, oh my gosh, not just, you know, a subset, but all books in all independent booksellers. That was the #1 book. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was cool. Mm-hmm.
Well, there are so many things about that that are so very cool.
You mentioned, you know, the Beyond the Flower of Life book, and that you know, yours is dog-eared. That book was like 10 years in the making, and I kept copious notes after every workshop, and I'll bet you I taught, you know, 45 workshops a year easily, just Flower of Life workshops, plus other workshops that I was teaching, you know, sequentially, you know, advanced workshops and manifestation workshops like that. And that book really represents the compilation of not only my work, but my experiences with people and what happened, you know, when these things happen and these things happen. And I would say to people, when I would teach a class, you know, you're riding on the shoulders of the people who took this class earlier. And every week it got better and better and better. And that's one of the reasons why that book is so jam-packed. You know, it's really intense. And the same thing happened with Waking Up in 5D. You know, I realized that there were a lot of things that I was getting that was 5D. You know, the whole idea of doing the Merkaba is a 5D experience. So you were right on when you said you felt like you're having these shifts and everything, because that was what was happening. What people don't realize is it's still the most powerful meditation you can do to anchor in your fifth dimensional vibrational uniform, if you will, the Merkaba. And in the new book, Waking Up in 5D, I have a 5D Merkaba that takes you to the higher levels and opens up that system to an even greater geometry. And it's pretty profound.
Hello, and welcome to Lighten Up. I'm your host, Suzanne Ross, and I am so delighted to be here today with Tom Dongo. Hello, Tom.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Tom is the author of 7 books, mostly on Sedona. He is exploring the phenomenon of UFO sightings, but also supernatural experiences here in Sedona. And one thing I really love about your books, Tom, is that you really connect the paranormal experiences with spirituality.
Yeah.
And that's really beautiful. Yeah. What inspired you to take that approach with the UFO?
Oh, yeah, it's just the way I am, and nothing really inspired me. It's just the way I approach the whole thing.
And so you started having paranormal, supernatural experiences here in Sedona over 30 years ago.
Well, I'll tell you how it all actually happened. I had a store in Reno, Nevada, and before that I wasn't interested in anything spiritual or UFOs, anything. And I used to, my lunch hour, I'd just go for a walk somewhere to get out of the store. So it was on Moana Lane in Reno, where the store was, and I was walking along the sidewalk, and I felt these giant hands grab my shoulders, you know, and I was thinking, you know, this is really weird, but I'm going to go along with it and see what, you know, hands this big, you know, that would just grab my shoulders like this, and I'm thinking, this is really bizarre, but, you know, I said, all right, so I'm being steered. I probably could have just lifted my feet up, and I probably would have floated down the side. Now, and I've heard of other people having this exact same experience. I've read about it in books. So I'm walking along the sidewalk on Moana Lane, and the giant hands are steering me. They turn me like this, and I'm going into a parking lot, and I'm being maneuvered through the cars to the corner of the shopping center, and it was a bookstore. So I'm going, all right, well, let's see what what happens. So, you know, I go through the doors, and I'm being maneuvered through the aisles. I can remember like this was yesterday, and I think it was 45 years ago now. But I get to the very back of the store, and they had a bunch of, I think they were all used books, a big rack of used books, and the hands bent me over like this. And I'm looking at a book at the bottom, and so I'm looking right at one book, so I bend down and pulled it out, and it was Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts. Oh. And I spent 6 months studying that book, and that's what got me into this whole thing. Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts, channel book.
I have read that book myself, and I was very intrigued.
Yeah.
And so that kind of set you off on a journey to explore.
And then I moved to Santa Cruz, California after that, and get into all kinds of metaphysical stuff, and the Berkeley Psychic Institute and all that. And that
Did you attend that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was real interesting. I met some people that were very psychic, and I found out that I had abilities they didn't have. So I'm thinking, oh, this is really cool. I want, you know, let's see where it goes. So, you know, from there, you know, I was in Santa Cruz for 4 years, and basically metaphysical stuff, and you name it, as far as Eastern religions and all that, Zen and the whole deal in Santa Cruz. And Santa Cruz is still that way. So from Santa Cruz, I moved to Sedona, because I had some friends here, and I thought Sedona was Phoenix. I thought it looked like Phoenix, just sand and cactus. So I got here, and they had a center here at the time in the village of Oak Creek, and I thought, well, I'll stay here. It was the Tibetan Foundation.
Okay.
It was long story, but anyway, it was the Tibetan Foundation, and so I thought, well, I'll stay here for a year or two, and then I'm going to go somewhere else. So 32 years later, I'm still here.
32 years and 7 books later.
Yeah.
All about your experiences in Sedona for the last 32 years.
Yeah.
Welcome to Lighten Up. I am your host, Suzanne Ross, and it's so exciting to be here with Lightstar. Welcome, Lightstar.
Thank you.
And this is part 2 of our conversation about how Lightstar discovered her true calling as a celestial channel, as a starseed ambassador, and as an attunement artist. So, Lightstar, let's talk about now how you tune into these different realms of consciousness or different dimensions and different star races. So you were telling me that you can tune into the elementals, the angelics, and then star races in different realms and dimensions.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, and I would say that a lot of this developed in the early stages of doing my artwork. When that was starting to flourish and blossom and come out, I was already starting to do angels and the elementals because of the nature world, and so I do a lot of fairies and elven and the natural world with Mother Nature and animals even, and so that just started to unfold a whole nother layer of the star seeds and the star seed realms. So they started to come out, and I'm been on a series of doing the star people images. And so I've been doing them because I'm tuning into their vibration and just coming through and depicting them in a visual sense. And also the language. So the language will come through, but I'm also actually drawing the symbols or the codes and light language for that particular race that wants to overlay or relay a specific message. And so the emulation of the image itself, the art images, is actually has encodement within it from these star races that will actually, when you see it, when you visualize it, and hold it, work with it, meditate with it, even if it's on your wall, that energy is kind of imbuing into your environment and reattuning you or realigning you to that particular overview or overlay of what that image is portraying. So sometimes it could be more of a very loving vibration or more about love. Sometimes it's more of a grounding sense. It just depends on the image. And so it started to come through mostly in the artwork, I would say, first and foremost. But I would also say the language came through very early on. And Pleiadians, a lot of people know Pleiadian energy. It's really one of the most predominant races that are here on Earth right now. So this brings in that sort of opening, Again, remembering, opening up the heart and just expressing yourself and allowing yourself to receive. Those of you that have difficulty receiving, this is time to receive now. Okay, so this is, again, putting that mind off to the side and just opening up the heart to receive. Velai hanai kalehina akula sahima mesa we Fahrenheit valeha kalehine soma shani la kihina saina lehanai usoma hine washani kalea usani ashame lahane galianatai mesani solare kali masieleha kaliameni ula sahima shaulaki sohusha maile saila nele akilema antula saena taela kaela male paneshanare kalean.
Hello and welcome to Lighten Up. I am your host, Suzanne Ross, and I'm so delighted to be here today with Joseph P. Anthony. Welcome, Joseph.
Hi, Suzanne. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Joseph has been a professional astrologer for over 20 years. So let's talk a little bit about astrology in connection to the Ascension.
Oh, that's really big. First of all, people have to understand what astrology really is. It's understanding cycles. That's what it is, at its essence, at its core. The people that created astrology, I mean, highly intelligent.
Mayans? Did it start with the Mayans?
No, no. It
Okay.
goes, the Greeks, the Mesopotamians, the Babylonians, it goes that far back. But they had a lot of help.
Yes.
Because, you know,
Mesopotamia, right? We had the whole
Egyptian,
Anunnaki, Nephilim stories, yes.
Exactly. 88 constellations. You know, they were able to name and categorize 88 constellations. You can't do that from Earth. You know, there's no way.
Okay.
So there had to have been some form of help. And so what we understand is these 12, and I know there's 13 with Ophiuchus, we astrologers know that, but these 12 constellations represent sort of a connection to energy. And so each one of these constellations is like a part of our psyche. We all have all 12 in us. It all depends on where they're aligned. So the way it works is, from a symbolic standpoint, the moment you're born, your soul is coming from higher density or higher planes of evolution, and it's traveling down into this physical world, into your soul. And as it does this, it's like a stamp in time, imprinted in time. Now, the reason we use the actual birth, the moment you detach from your mother, you know, they cut the cord, you're born, you're breathing air, and that date of your incarnation, if you will, is because you are detaching from your mother, and you're your own entity, your own energy. So it's a snapshot in time, as opposed to like the womb, when you actually are in that little cell that's forming. You know, and so what astrology is a snapshot in time of the energies at play.
welcome to Lighten Up TV. I am your host, Suzanne Ross, and it is such a privilege to be here today with Reverend John Polk. Welcome, Reverend John.
Suzanne, thanks for having me on the show.
It is such a pleasure. Reverend John is, of course, an international metaphysical minister, but also a Reiki master teacher and a medium. And he has 2 books out, the Yahweh, Biblical God is an Alien, and also The Blue Beings. I connected with Reverend John Polk because I came across his book, Yahweh, the Biblical God is an Alien, at a bookstore in Sedona. And I had just been on a guest panel with J.J. Hurtak. And, you know, his book, The Keys of Enoch, is very much about Yahweh and Enoch. And so on the heels of that, you know, I come across this book. And so I snagged it up. I couldn't put it down. And everything I read just resonated with me so profoundly that I knew I needed to reach out to this Reverend John guy. And I mean, thank you so much for your quick response. I emailed you, and you know, you were just quick to reply with such graciousness and, you know, willingness to just come right on and be on my show. So, you know, thank you so much for that. And wow, your book, Yahweh, is very profound and spot on for me.
Excellent. I'm always open to communicating with anybody that wants to talk with me about the book. And for the most part, people that do purchase it, first they got to get past the title. And if they can get past the title, they usually pretty much believe in that concept in the first place. They may not know all the details or need somebody to help them fill in the blanks. And I don't have all of the material to fill in every blank. But I can fill in some critical blanks that do need to be addressed. And a lot of these things are not being addressed that I do feel I do address in my book.
Absolutely. And, you know, on top of being a big fan of The Keys of Enoch by J.J. Hurtak, I've also, for the past, you know, 8 years, been really involved in, you know, Zachariah Sitchin's work with the Sumerian clay tablets, and, you know, just really dove into the whole, you know, Anunnaki Nephilim stories. And then also, after reading The 12th Planet, was planning to interview a Mennonite pastor in this Mennonite town. And so I thought, you know, let me dive in and kind of refresh my memory on the Bible, right? So I'm going through the Old Testament, and I just went, bam. Enlil is the Almighty Lord in the Old Testament, right?
Yes. That's what I believe to be true. Most Anunnaki researchers, I work with a team of Anunnaki researchers, including Dr. Sasha and Janet Lesson, that will be presenting at Contact in the Desert, which is less than a week away. We all believe it. We all believe it. And, you know, let's say it's not Enlil. It isn't, that being is an extraterrestrial. You know, whether it's Enlil or not, we all profess to believe that it is Enlil. Nobody can, you know, completely and totally prove it, but we really don't care based on our research.
Right? I mean, but the Sumerian clay tablets most certainly point to that.
They do.
You know, yeah. And, you know, Lord Enlil, the Almighty Lord, you know, and we all know, reading the Old Testament, our God wouldn't do these things. He wouldn't be vengeful and spiteful and, you know, create a flood that killed everyone, you know, and so just makes perfect sense. And he was the older brother, as I understand it, and then there was Enki and Nineveh, of course. But yeah, so very tuned in to all of that. So when I read your book, I was like, yes, yes, and yes. We have alien creator gods who have the power to create worlds, and as such, to program the beings inhabiting them.
Oh, absolutely. So this gentleman, his name's Jonathan. He came across my book. He lives up in Chicago, and it resonated with him very well. I'm 47. He's probably 10 years younger than me. But one thing that he brought up that was of particular interest is that Enlil would actually drain the blood of animals that he cooked. So now God drains the blood of animals that he cooks and eats. this is God, and this is in the Old Testament and in the Hebrew Bible. Why would God, number one, have to kill an animal, eat an animal, but why would he drain the blood? And I'll tell you why. Because the Draco reptilians like their meat bloody. The Anunnaki do not. So they actually eat food, as ascended masters as they are. They still eat food. They eat food, they eat meat, they eat vegetables, they eat animals. They're omnivores, which you would never think that God would eat food. Well, God in the Bible ate food, but he would first drain the blood out of the animal before he would even cook it.
Right? And another thing that struck me was like, God goes searching for Adam and Eve in the garden. You know, you're like, God wouldn't have to look for Adam and Eve.
No, he would know exactly where they are. Right. I mean, he made them. You know, you'd think he'd know where he put them.
Right. Yes. And then so I got to thinking, you know, well, I kind of thought the Keys of Enoch was saying like Yahweh was the Hebrew God. So are they like worshiping Yahweh as God? And then I made up with Fred Rusher, who works very closely with the Her Talks and has for 40 years. And he said, Suzanne, no, he's the creator God of our local universe. That's what JJ is saying. And I went, bam. Wow, okay.
But you heard what you just said. Not just Earth, but the universe.
The local universe.
The local universe.
Yeah.
And so that plays into my theory, among other theories, completely, that this little blue dot in our solar system in the Milky Way galaxy is not unique in any way whatsoever. This whole human creation story is going on a multitude of different planets all throughout the omniverse. So not just the universe, but every universe, which implies not just a multiverse, but an omniverse, which is every verse. So imagine this. You're in a space-time vehicle. You leave Earth. You go to 1975. Do you land on this planet in this physical location in our solar system, or do you end up in a different space timeline continuum on another Earth in another dimension? And what I believe, it's both, because I believe that the dimensions are right on top of each other, that we just don't vibrate at a certain frequency to be able to access them unless you know how to vibrate at a certain frequency to access these extra dimensional realms. And that's something that I've learned to do and that I can actually teach people how to do. So let's extrapolate that even more. How many planets has Enlil and his pantheon of gods terraformed and seeded life on and created religions on geodetic markers, which are almost always obelisks or pyramids or stone structures of certain kinds that mirror star constellations, more specifically Orion, Pleiades, Sirius, and Cygnus, which the Anunnaki conquered millions and perhaps even billions of years ago.
Wow, so fascinating. I am proposing to Paramount Studios to do a show called Supernatural Adventures Around the Globe and Into the Cosmos. So they want to know, like, what are the places you would want to go in? And a season is 13 shows. So I'm like, okay, 13 sacred sites around the planet. So honest to God, I started channeling, like, okay, what would those 13 sites be? So as I'm getting this channeling, and I have it written down over here, I got the 13 sites. Then a voice came through me, and those 13 sites are aligned with 13 constellations. So then I went and I looked up constellations, and I pegged on 13 of them. I lined up the 13 sacred sites with the 13 constellations, took my pendulum, and my pendulum showed me what site was aligned with what constellation. And I did that for all 13, so you know, that'll be the theme for that season, you know, of the show. And hopefully I can go to those places live. I mean, that's the intention. But yes, as above, so below is the theme. And I certainly do believe, yes, that, you know, that holds very true. welcome to Lighten Up. I'm so honored to be here today with Lori McDonald. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you very much for having me.
Lori has been a clinical hypnotherapist for over 25 years, and she is now rated one of the best hypnotherapists in all of Sacramento. She just had a book come out called Extraterrestrial Interference, and since you started practicing hypnotherapy, it became pretty evident right away that you had the ability to sort of bring up extraterrestrial memories that people were having.
Sure.
And that is your gift, and you're now...
Yeah, I don't want to say I bring them up. To say that they have them, and I have the ability to help them get a deeper understanding so that they can shed more light on it, lighten up a little bit about it, because, it's actually can be very scary, and not because the entity is necessarily negative, but because it's so out of your personal belief system, so out of your comfort zone, that you really just can't process that type of information. And so I'll have people either referred to me through a number of different places. MUFON is one of them. Opus, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support, has also been around for about 25 years. Very happy. I'm now the president of that nonprofit organization, and
Yes.
we actually have a huge resource plethora of people available that can, a surgeon who can do the extraterrestrial implant removal. We have a lab that we can send it to for analysis. We have doctors, lawyers, therapists. We're there to support you through any anomalous activity, so to help you understand and interpret the environment and the world in which we live. Because the truth is, this is a magical world, and there are many things happening, non-human life of all forms, and we need to be able to find our place in the hierarchy, step into our personal power, and begin to ascend to a higher way of thinking, a higher way of being. So yes, they'll come to me for insight into their either abduction phenomena. I also work with contactees, people who receive downloads, also people who feel that they're starseeds, some channelers, and this is the truth. These experiences are life-altering. When something happens to you and it stays with you for your entire life, and it was monumental in the mind, it changed you, it's something that was out of the ordinary, it's important to understand what that means to you. What I think it means to most people is that it's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call in understanding our ability to challenge reality, to create an expanded consciousness, to take assertively those next steps in the personal evolution of humanity, ourselves and humanity as a collective consciousness as a whole.
Welcome to Lighten Up. I am your host, Suzanne Ross, and it is such an honor and privilege, truly, to be interviewing one of the great minds in cosmology research, Laird Scranton. Welcome, Laird.
Hey, Suzanne, thank you very much for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
My first introduction to Laird was watching an episode of The Pyramid Code. And you came on to talk about the similarities between Dogon cosmological symbols and Egyptian hieroglyphs as the show was exploring Egyptian cosmology. And I became so intrigued by this Dogon tribe that I dove right in to learn more and purchased your books, Sacred Symbols of the Dogon and Science of the Dogon, which is just two of the many books you've written, Laird. I would love to start just by understanding how a software designer with an English degree from Vassar became interested in cosmology.
Well, it sort of happened by accident. I mean, interestingly enough, those skills are related to each other. They have bearing on cosmology. But my wife handed me a book called Unexplained by Jerome Clark, and each chapter in the book was about a mystery that hadn't been solved. And one of those mysteries was about the Dogon, which is the Dogon are a modern tribe in Africa, a primitive tribe. And they knew some things about astronomy that they shouldn't know without access to telescopes and things like that. So I thought, wow, this is really interesting. Wherever it leads is going to be an interesting pastime to pursue. And it sort of drew me in the way you said you've been drawn into research. It's a very interesting subject.
Here we are at the V Heritage Site in supernatural Sedona, the largest and most well-preserved petroglyph site in the Verde Valley, with 1,032 petroglyphs carved onto 13 panels. This is known as the Beaver Creek rock art style and is attributed to the southern Sinagua culture of Native Americans who resided here between 1100 and 1300 A.D. Most of the petroglyphs are zoomorphs, representing animals that were prevalent here at the time. But the ones we're really intrigued by are the spirals and the grids and the strange-looking humanoids. Could these spirals represent cycles of time, or maybe the Milky Way galaxy? Could the grids represent a matrix of consciousness enveloping our world, the true nature of reality we're experiencing? And what do the strange humanoid figures represent? Could these be otherworldly visitors who came to this area to visit the Sinaguans at that time? These are important historical symbols that give us an indication on our virtual quest for the truth about our origin and destiny here in supernatural Sedona. To help us understand the deeper meaning and significance these symbols may have had for the Native American peoples at that time is Zuni, Clifford Mahooty. Thank you so much for joining us, Clifford.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I've always been interested in a lot of these rock drawings all over the Southwest and other places, and it seems to me that it's a storybook of what our ancestors wrote many years ago, and this is our permanent record. And so I have been working with this type of petroglyphs for some time. Around Zuni, where I'm from, we have a lot of those, but as you go out further away from my own hometown, you see the same symbols and the same types of petroglyphs in the rock art, and they seem to have a continuity about things that probably occurred way back about 1,000 years ago, at least. And others are even older than that. But I'm glad to be here with you folks and see what we can find out about my ancestors when they wrote these thousands of years ago. Thank you.
Okay. There it is. How many times have you been interviewed, my dear? Countless. Countless, right? Oh my goodness. Hello and welcome to Lighten Up TV. I am your host, Suzanne Ross, and it is such an honor and a privilege to be here today with Travis Walton. Welcome, Travis.
Well, thanks for having me.
We are here at the Cosmic Awakening Conference at the Creative Life Center in Sedona, Arizona. And Travis Walton is a speaker here at this incredible event. And his book, A Fire in the Sky, The Walton Experience, documents details around the actual experience that he had. Of course, there was a major Hollywood movie made about his experience called Fire in the Sky, but now Travis has come out with a book and a documentary to really reveal what actually happened. So it's so wonderful that you agreed to do the Hollywood movie, though, because truly your experience gave a lot of people, I think, the courage to come out and really speak out about their experience.
Yeah, even though there was the inevitable Hollywood fictionalizations that were added, but I think overall the net effect was beneficial. It did, like you say, awaken people to the reality of this phenomenon.
Yes, that is true. And the movie was, Hollywood style, but I think that being that had a really powerful impact on so many millions of people to open their mind, to this idea that, yes, there are crafts coming and abductions are happening.
Yeah, and back when this happened, it was pretty well established that anybody who believed that such things could be was a kook. I mean, the general consensus attitude, everybody got it that, aliens, ha ha ha, what a joke. But, we're at a point in our scientific knowledge, verifiable facts, that anybody that thinks that we're alone in the universe or that it's impossible for them to reach here, that's the kook. Those are the nutcases.
Mm-hmm. Yes, in the delusion that we are alone in a galaxy with billions of solar systems, yes. So, I'm sure that you've been asked a million times, but can you give us a brief description in your own words about what happened on November 5th?
Well, on November 5th, 1975, I was working in the woods with 6 other men. We encountered a UFO on the way home from work, and I got out to take a closer look. Wound up being injured by discharging energy from the craft and being taken aboard and for over 5 days. I think, in retrospect, that was in an effort to heal, to correct the damage that had accidentally occurred. Now, my crew members were accused of murdering me, and they put up a fantastic cover story, but they passed a lie detector test from the state police, and years of investigation discredited every attempt to explain this away. And so, even still, there's ongoing research concerning evidence left at the site, etc.
So at the site, did they find some kind of electromagnetic radiation?
Yeah, there was some magnetic readings in the days afterwards. There were some high radiation levels, and even evidence in the trees nearest where the craft came down that they had been exposed to high levels of radiation.
And I understand that ultimately your claims and the claims of your crew members were validated on many different levels in many different ways.
Yeah, as I mentioned, they passed lie detector tests, but, if you had 6 men attesting that they had witnessed a murder, that would be an open and shut case in an American court of law. But somehow when it comes to UFOs, even them all passing multiple polygraph tests, some people are reluctant to accept the truth of what happened. But it happened.
Yes, it sure did. And so you were taken up in a beam of light, and you found yourself aboard a spacecraft with humanoid beings.
Yeah, 2 types of beings. They didn't have that term back then, but the Greys and what people call the Pleiadians or the Nordics. And, I think they're, my initial impression was that the more human-looking variety were there to intervene on what I thought to be an abduction, a kidnapping, but actually was probably more of a cooperative effort that the more human-looking ones were just in a better position to finish the repairs that were necessary.
And were these repairs to your health?
I do believe so. The men said that the blast of energy was so powerful that they immediately had no doubt that it killed him. They were screaming at each other, "He's dead." And that was the reason they took off at that point. They were terrified, and it would be pointless to, get somebody else killed to save somebody they thought was already dead. Steve said my body flew 20 feet, and John said that I fell like a sack of meat, like there wasn't a bone in my body. And they even argued whether it had disintegrated. And even as they returned and saw the craft departing, their greatest fear was what my body was going to look like, because it was that violent.
So essentially it was an accident. You guys came upon this beam of light. So the beam of light was for another purpose, obviously, than to take you up.
Yeah, I think either some sort of a side effect of the propulsion system, or perhaps some sort of a charge that might build up in the surface of something moving at high speed through very dry air. Whatever it was probably fatal. But not intentionally.
So once you were aboard, you went through these various healing modalities and procedures. The Hollywood movie depicted a large room with everybody sort of hanging in these pods. Is that an accurate
No,
depiction?
that's Hollywood fiction. I really didn't know the process involved. I saw some what could have been medical instruments or tools, but nothing familiar that I would recognize. I can imagine that the healing techniques would be beyond anything we would be familiar with. The physicist Michio Kaku commented on television that people are continually acting as if they are assuming that these civilizations are maybe a few hundred years ahead of us at most. But he said, based on the age of these star systems, they could easily be millions of years ahead of us. And, when you think that virtually everything we have that's technological has come about in the last 200 years, to imagine what it would be like in 200,000 or 2 million years is for anyone to put limitations on what they might be able to do is rather arrogant.
That was a smaller plane.
No,
That
all
was
of
a
these
small
are
loud
small
one.
planes.
Yeah, they must be coming into the Sedona airport, but I don't know if large craft would come into Sedona airport. I don't think it's big enough, Especially wormhole travel. I mean, clearly our scientists today, even Einstein with the Einstein-Rosen bridge, imagined the possibility of bending space and time to bring 2 points, A and B, together and form this wormhole. So
absolutely, any sort of dimensional thing. There's many fundamental physics theories that would allow for such a thing. And for our supposed scientists to say that's impossible is absurd, because the history of science is full of some of the best and brightest minds declaring something to be impossible that was shortly accomplished. So who knows what they were able to accomplish and how soon, but I think there may have been some beneficial side effects. I was concerned that there would be negative health consequences over the subsequent years, but as it turned out, it was quite the opposite. I've been very healthy ever since, and so although I do try to live a healthy lifestyle, it's possible that I got a little tune-up in the process.
yes, would you say just physically, or what about mentally?
Well, I don't like to talk about that, but yeah, even that. I had an IQ test before the incident and one afterwards, and it was quite a jump there. But who knows? Anything of that nature, you have documentation like that. Skeptics can write it off to some other factor.
Yes, yes. You have an intuitive knowing about it, though, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. And so you spent 5 days on this craft being healed, and you had the opportunity to interact with these humanoid beings, the Pleiadians and/or the Greys, or were there just really no
I
verbal
didn't see these two beings interacting with each other, so it took me a while to figure out that it was probably more cooperative. But the nightmares that I had right after.
There's an air show or something.
The nightmares that I had in the months afterwards were mostly involving what's called the Greys, the small beings. But I think a lot of that had to do with just some, an intersection of circumstances that gave me, fear-inducing cues that weren't really accurate to what my situation was. But the dreams that came about later were much less fearful and involved the more human-looking type. So hypnosis was unsuccessful at retrieving those memories intact, but who knows? Maybe someday I'll find out what happened.
Yes. And so 5 days later you returned, and I would imagine that there was an onslaught of skepticism and being exploited. That must have been a difficult time for you.
Yes, it was very difficult to, at the same time having some pretty devastating financial effects on me to be accused that this was somehow profit-oriented. It never has been. Far from it. At the same time, this onslaught of attacks on my reputation and that of the crew, it took years of fighting back, meticulously, carefully, disproving each and every theory that these skeptics came up with. And, sum it up, even at the time that the crew passed lie detector tests, and there were 6 tests, the president of the American Polygraph Association said that the odds were over 1,000,000 to 1 of there being a mistake when you have that many people passing tests on the same issue. A small percentage of error on a single test is canceled out when you have that large number of it's called a cohort, the number of tests involved. And that was with 6 tests. But now there's been 16 past tests. I have passed 5 different tests from 3 different examiners of the highest qualifications, all of whom these examiners had years of law enforcement experience. So the evidence has been reviewed by some of the top people in the field, and it's indisputable.
Indisputable, yes. Have you had contact since that experience?
Well, there's a lot of really interesting things that have happened in connection with this, but I stake a lot on the idea of credibility, the documentation, the things that, have been measured at the site, instrumentation, testimony from various experts. And I shy away from reporting anything I can't prove. But there is one incident that happened where I had other witnesses involving one of these giant black triangles. And although it's possible that at least some of those are some secret military aircraft, I wouldn't call it aircraft, because it was able to stop dead in the air. The idea that this is likely something that secret government laboratories have back engineered from an alien craft is entirely possible. Certainly technology that we don't have anything that's openly known about.
That's the key phrase, that we openly know about, right? Because I think there's more and more disclosure about what our government and military does not share with the public.
And, you know, I have a kind of an unpopular perspective on that. I think that the aliens have a purpose in not making open contact. You know, I point out that when the skeptics say, well, if it was real, they just land and say, hello, Earth people, here we are. Now, they obviously don't do that. But by the same token, with that level of technology, they would be capable of doing everything they're doing here and remain completely undetected. There'd be no ufology, there'd be no sightings, no stories. These sightings, these interactions, these contacts are always of limited provability by design. The idea is to gradually accustom humans to the fact that we are not alone in the universe in a way that's the least disruptive, the least harmful to human societies. And a lot of people think, well, wouldn't that be great to have free energy tomorrow? Actually, that would really tear things up. A lot of people die because, you know, the world economies are based on petrodollars. And for that to have the rug jerked out from under them tomorrow would not be the best way to go about that. I think this gradual approach is a good thing. So what I'm saying, the unpopular view might be that our government might not be quite so nefarious in maintaining the idea of incremental disclosure, you might call it, that okay, we can know a little bit about this little by little, but nothing that's going to do that kind of overwhelming sort of effect to just outrightly make it indisputable tomorrow.
Yes, and isn't there a concept around violating the free will of those who do not wish to have these experiences?
Well, yeah, that's a concept, but you know, there's what about the free will of a small child who has a serious toothache, and you're taking him to the dentist? The kid definitely does not want to get in that chair, and you know, he or she may have nightmares about men in white coats for a long time after that. Come to view the dentist as some kind of a demon, but actually the net effect of the experience was to the benefit of the child, and there's just no explaining it to them. And so in that sense, our resistance, I have examples of you know, a researcher who's done a great deal of hypnotic regression on people who've had experiences that they thought were negative, and then only to discover later that medical issues that they'd had would become resolved. So, yeah, I believe in free agency, free will, and I do believe that a benevolent society, no matter how advanced, would be respectful of that. But I also think at the same time that there's a deliberate, conscious attempt by these beings to help us along, nudge us in the right direction. So many creative people, artists, musicians, writers, scientists, even Nikola Tesla, you know, credits some of his discoveries as being stuff that was coming from aliens. And, you know, of course he was written off as being some eccentric wacko, but he had some pretty good science there. And so with these inspirational things coming along to help people in beneficial ways, I think is another intervention that doesn't violate the, you know, the theorized non-interference directive, the prime directive. You can't do anything too overt. I think, you know, to, you know, kind of nudge us along in a good direction isn't doing any harm.
Thank you for that perspective about benevolent beings truly coming into the Earth's environment to heal us, to guide us, to give us inspiration. I know a lot of channeled books feel very inspirational, and the knowledge and wisdom that they're sharing in these books is just really to help advance the human race. So bless you for sharing that really positive perspective about benevolent beings who are just here in support of humanity.
Yeah, I really think so. You know, I've had 40 years to think about this. I could be wrong, you know. It's just I only have my own experience to judge by. But if you think about it, having that vast of power, you know, the fact that they're still alive and haven't destroyed themselves, maybe, you know, prima facie evidence, proof that they are benevolent, not malevolent, because if they were like that, they would have destroyed themselves long ago.
Yes. And maybe family members. A lot of people are now recognizing the fact that there may be some alien DNA intermixed with our human DNA, and that many of us on this planet may actually be hybrid beings with some DNA from other star races.
Some of these mail-order DNA tests are very interesting, and it's getting more interesting all the time because the database is becoming quite large, and they're having a lot more things to compare one to another.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing your beautiful book with us, Fire in the Sky. And it's available on Amazon, I would imagine?
No, it's only through my website, traviswalton.com.
Okay. Fire in the Sky, available at Travis Walton's website, traviswalton.com. Also a documentary, a film.
Yes, Travis. I didn't name it, but it's named Travis. And it's a 90-minute documentary of some of the top researchers in the field. And it's, you know, it's won awards in over 24 film festivals. So it's a nice piece of work.
I look forward to that. So thank you very much, Travis. I sure appreciate your time. It's been such an honor and privilege to interview you. I really admire your courage and perseverance.
Well, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And thanks for joining us for this episode of Lighten Up. Thank you, my dear. That was wonderful. Beautiful information. I really do respect and admire you, Travis. You know, I mean, you could have just hidden away and...
Oh, believe me, I was tempted. I actually